Thanks, Rakesh. And thanks for this event. It's fantastic to see everyone, everyone's amazing technologies, and that almost all of the sessions have one presentation that's on emissions. So here I am as the token emissions presentation. And thanks for the Blue Origin presentation. I'm actually going to be profoundly impatient in this presentation. So let me show the other side of that one for a minute here. The question here today is, how can we use space data for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, specifically in North America, methane, and in Europe, methane. So we'll go with methane today. So very quickly on just defining the problem a little bit. Those of you that remember Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth in 2006, you may remember the CO2 curve. And I hope you've seen the CO2 curve, because it's a really important one that tells us how the concentrations of CO2 are increasing over time. This is the methane curve. So this is from the US National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. And those bumps you see over time are the changing concentrations from the seasons. But the key point here is that it's increasing dramatically. And why does methane matter? So methane is actually 84 times more potent as a greenhouse warming gas than any other gas, than CO2 in the first 20 years. And at 100 years in the atmosphere, it's 28 to 34 times more, it has 28 to 34 times more greenhouse gas warming potential than CO2. As methane doesn't have as much, it's not as high a concentration in the atmosphere, so it hasn't been prioritized for many, many years. But given now that we understand how potent it is, it's quickly becoming a priority. And you may have noted that the Global Methane Pledge was signed at COP26 by more than 100 countries. This is absolutely a priority. And as we see that curve going up and up and up, I'm going to do what we love to do, to put a person out in a forest breathing some nice clean air and what we all hope for. This is a big, bold statement, but it is not hyperbole. Identifying and reducing methane emissions is the most effective way to tackle one of our most serious threats. This matters, and it's something we can address now, today, hence my impatience. So just to give you a bit of context for how we've looked at this in the past. So industrial methane emissions are a serious issue. They've been monitored for years, but they've always been monitored in situ on the ground, and sometimes with airborne sensors. And unfortunately, those are very costly. They result in sort of data gaps from infrequent monitoring. And we often don't see big leaks. If you have an oil and gas facility that's spewing methane, you might not see it for months. And then also there's inconsistent performance for those kind of measurements. So that's the problem. And here's the solution that GHGSat brought to the table. The company was founded in 2011, and the first satellite was launched in 2016. So that was our demonstration satellite. It's not a new technology. It's a sensor that's been around for over 100 years, but it's been applied in a very different way. Since August of 2020, so in the last 2 years, we've launched 5 commercial satellites. So that first satellite that launched in 2016 proved the technology. Had some problems, showed it worked. Really good thing. And now we've got 5 satellites up and running on a commercial level at very high resolution. We need to use satellites for this application because a lot of these facilities are remote. Sending someone out to address a leaking valve or a leaking compressor station is actually quite a costly affair. Even in relatively highly populated areas, they're still kind of out and remote. So these are the 5 application areas that we use it for. We've been driven largely by oil and gas. We're supported by the oil and gas sector. And so this has been our focus and our immediate business priority for the last 5 years. But we also work in the domains of waste management, agriculture, mining, and power generation. I could wax on about each one of these for more than an hour over coffee. I'd love to tell you whatever stories you want to hear, but let me just break into how we actually do this, and then I'll give you an anecdotal story. So what we do is we combine technologies. Anyone that stands on this stage and says they have the answer to emissions problems is lying. We do not have the answer to the emissions problem at GHGSat. It takes lots of technologies and it takes lots of brains. So what we do is we use low resolution public satellites that collect for the whole world. So the European Space Agency is the forerunner in this. So what you see there is these global measurements that tell us where the hotspots are. And then we zoom in with our high resolution satellites that take spot measurements instead of a sweeping motion across the Earth. And we capture where exactly the emission is coming from. This has been validated through blind testing by oil and gas operators and also by academics. So we know it works. We've proven it works. And I wanted to include these two images here. The one you see with the big purple area and then the one underneath. This is the same area. This is the same date. So you'll see the top image is the public satellite, fantastic for global and regional measurements. And then underneath you see 2 methane plumes. So that's a GHGSat measurement. That's what it looks like. You're about to see a bunch of those. So in one of those pixels on the top image, you would have over 74,000 GHGSat pixels. So that gives you a sense of what we're talking about. It's different technology solutions for different questions. There's a global level and then there's the local level. So let me give you a story of impact. Anyone that knows me knows I love to tell stories, and this one starts with a mud volcano. When I joined GHGSat, I'd never heard of a mud volcano. Now I know everything about mud volcanoes. So these things exist in Central Asia, and they're an indicator of natural gas. This is a very nice one with fire coming out of it. The methane has been lit. These volcanoes burp methane. So we've got an academic that wants to know everything about mud volcanoes, and we had lots of satellite capacity in the early days. So we were monitoring this site for mud volcanoes for ages. We didn't see them. Mud volcanoes were too small. And one day, after over a year of measuring, one of our operators spotted this in the corner of one of the images. I was like, what is that? And so they dug into it. They looked at other satellite imagery. So this is Central Asia. We can't just send someone out to take a look, but we looked at other satellite imagery and we found that it's a facility like this one, not this one, but one like this one. So you can imagine in this oil and gas facility, how much gas could be leaking and where it might be, who knows where it might be coming from in this. So we knew that's the kind of infrastructure we were monitoring, but that was kind of really all we knew at the time. We went back to our archive. Well, we did 3 things at the same time. One, we went back to our archive, which we happen to have one only because we've been looking for these mud volcanoes for ages. And it turns out that that source had been emitting the whole time. We hadn't spotted it, but because it's not what we were looking for. So at the same time, we called some diplomatic officials and we said, hey, listen, we found this huge methane leak in Central Asia. We'd really like to shut it down. That's our whole raison d'etre at GHGSat, is to reduce emissions. So, we can't send someone out to Central Asia. It's not that straightforward. So we started working diplomatic channels to say, hey, there's a problem. And at the same time, we called one of the world's foremost scientists out of the Netherlands, an institute called ESRAN. By the way, these images are our archive. So all those plumes are GHGSat plumes of that same site, and they're all different directions depending on which way the wind is going. When we called the academics, this is what they found. So they took an average over time because they can't get one measurement on one day in the way that we do at GHGSat. They do an average over time to get their measurements. So this is that same site. So they couldn't tell you exactly where it's coming from, but they saw there was a problem too. Now this is a 7 by 7 kilometer pixel with a very, very low detection threshold. The fact that they could see it was really very shocking. And so we worked together for a very long time to understand what was happening on this site. We found that there were actually 9 facilities in the immediate vicinity, and they were all popping up in different ways. For those of you that know American fairground games, we called it whack-a-mole. We were just trying to, beat this thing down, find where is this leak coming from. It'd pop up everywhere over time. So what happened out of this? The scientists came together, the commercial sector came together, and the diplomatic channels came together in a way that had never happened before. And that leak was shut down. Everyone was talking about it. This was 2019. Everyone was talking about it. It was all very exciting. One of the diplomats said that this was climate diplomacy in a way that had never been done before. This is an immediate opportunity for impact. Just one of those leaks, so like I said, there were a bunch of them in that area, shutting down just one of those was the equivalent of taking 1 million passenger vehicles off the road for a year. That's one leak, one image, one opportunity to get it right and do it right now. So we have a really worrying, media presentation of what's happening to us on the climate front. This is an immediate chance to do something about it. And that's what we're working on in GHGSat. So at the time, Forbes hailed it a possible revolution. That was in 2019. And I can tell you, it is a revolution. Let me show you what's new and what's next. So here's what's been happening this year. I decided to put up media taglines just because it's been really exciting. We've had a ton of firsts in GHGSat. We are measuring things that have never been measured before. The new satellites are performing at levels that have never been possible before. Scientists around the world are shocked by what we're seeing and what we're measuring. Things are changing. Our understanding of this problem is changing, and it's changing quickly. And the media has picked up on some of it in really interesting ways. So we're really careful in GHGSat not to be pointing fingers, and we try really hard to work collaboratively, because our goal in life is not to name and shame operators, but rather to work collaboratively to resolve the issue. We know we have to be on the same team to do this together. So there you see we had cow burps. So the first agricultural emission was captured in February this year. We also detected the largest methane emissions from an industrial source ever measured. So that came from Russia earlier this year. We've got landfills in Pakistan and so many others. Some of them are in the media. Most of them are not. I can tell you there's a lot of really awkward phone calls. Every time we find one, we call someone up, we tell them there's a problem, and they say, hold on, you can see what from space? And we proceed to have an awkward conversation until they realize we're not there to beat them up or shame them. We're there to work with them to address the problem. So here's what happened in 2021. We measured over 100,000 sites. We captured over 1 million square kilometers of imagery in 47 countries. That's what it looked like with 2 commercial satellites in 2021. We launched 3 this year, so we've more than doubled our capacity. So these numbers next year will look very different with the more than doubling of the capacity. And I'll talk in a minute how we expect to see that grow in the not too distant future. But I want to come back to that case in Central Asia. This is what that site looks like now. So I'd love to tell you that leak was shut down and that was the end of the story, but it's not the end of the story, because here we see it again. So this is that site taken over a course of about a year, a little less than a year. So all those different plumes If I were to run this as a video, you'd just see them all popping up all over the place, but I didn't want a video to break in our IT system here. And what you see in those little triangles, that's where all the facilities are. If we can't find the leaks, we can't stop the leaks. And that's the purpose of this technology. And it's something that's here today, and it's something that we can do something about today. So what's next? The slide is blank, because what's next is for all of us. So for GHGSat, there will be another 6 satellites launching next year. So that's another more than doubling of our capacity. We've got new applications on the horizon. European Space Agency and NASA are very excited about what we're doing, and they're pushing out the data in all kinds of programs. European Space Agency this summer actually started using our data to validate their satellites, which is a huge step forward for us as a business. We've got new customers, we've got new partners, and one really exciting thing on the horizon is sustainable finance. So the investment community is getting involved in that. How can we capture the emissions problem in their investment portfolios? That's happening now. So my call to action here today is for all of you to take this away in your own domains and have a think about it. Can it help you? Can you help this problem in some way? Because it's actually here right now. And my impatience comes from the fact that we know the answer. We know where the big leaks are coming from. We can do something about it right now today. That's it. Thanks.